I am manuscript and I've published over 50 papers, but I've been rejected at least the same amount of times, if not more. And what I'm going to share in this video is some of my experience in how you deal with the comments that you get back from reviewers. So the first thing you have to remember is, well done on getting your paper or your grant submitted. That's a real achievement in itself, and it's something that you can be proud of. But I also know after that you've got this agonizing wait while you're waiting for the reviewer's comments to come back to you, where you're anxiously refreshing the button to see if something has happened. And when you do get the comments back, they're not always exactly what you hoped for. And particularly, I'm going to talk about how you combat what we call grumpy reviewer too. So this has got its own Facebook page, over 12,000 subscribers in Twitter. And what this means is that you've got very positive, constructive feedback from one reviewer, and then another one, not exactly quite what you wanted, okay? So the best advice that I probably ever got is when I submitted my first grant, is when you get those comments, printed it out, folded it to a nice little ball, and just dropped it in the bin for a bit. Because when you initially get your comments back, you do tend to be a bit emotional. And you might not see clearly what the reviewers actually meant, and in your emotions, your judgment can be a little bit clouded. So the first tip I'm going to give you then is, when you get your comments, leave them for a little bit, okay? Even though it's very tempting to kind of look at them and try and tackle them straight away, you might not be in the right frame of mind to do that. So leave them for a little bit, discuss it with other people, because the comments might not be as bad as you think. And that's what I often had. When you give it some time, you give it a day, you go back to these comments, and when you objectively think about it, then you start to realize what they actually meant, and that the work is maybe not as much as you would have to do. And particularly, you should be aware that you shouldn't take these comments personal. It might feel like an attack of your work or on yourself, but that often is not the case. And then the second tip when it comes to that, when you're in the right frame of mind to actually start revising your paper, this is when you start to see that often these reviewer comments are very helpful. They might suggest additional experiments that you haven't thought of, other control experiments, another technique. So they would actually add value to your paper in most of the cases. The third tip is, okay, you got your comments back and your paper wasn't rejected straight away. They might ask you for some minor comments, which tends to relate to the text, or some major comments where you actually need to do additional experiments. And the way we do it in my group is that you start drafting like a response. You break everything down into bullet points and you see how you're going to tackle each point. And the key thing here is, especially if you've got major reviews coming in, which probably means that you need to do some additional experiments. And these take time and you have to plan it. So you're often working with a big team of authors, so get them involved in this because they will have different expertise and they can help with different questions. But the key thing here is when you start drafting those, start to think about, okay, what is it that we really need to do in terms of experiments? Because as I said, these are time consuming. So you need to plan those in advance because sometimes you only have limited time to respond to the reviewers. So it might mean that you need to make sure that certain equipment is available or that you need to order some new chemicals. And the fourth tip, and this comes back to seeing this as constructive feedback, is to not be defensive in your comments. You usually start off by thanking the reviewers. And then it's key to be respectful in their response towards them. And it's perfectly fine if you don't take all of the comments on board. But what the editor will look for is that you've at least considered carefully these points. So if you're not going to do particular experiments that the reviewer asked for, you need to give a good justification why you think that's not possible. And then the fifth tip is to look at the time frame that you've got. So depending on what type of revisions you're getting, so the minor ones can only be, for instance, 2 weeks, or major ones you can even have up to half a year. So what you need to have a look at and seeing in whether the experiments that you need to do are feasible within that time frame. So you have to plan things, but equally so if you feel like, and particularly during this ongoing pandemic where maybe not all the labs are as available as they normally would be, you are allowed to ask for additional time to complete it, if providing that you have a valid reason for it. Last, final tip, tip 6, what happens or what do you do when your paper is rejected? Unfortunately, you will get to cope with many rejections. And I know particularly when I was a PhD student, when I just started, this was very difficult to handle. You do get better, you get more resilient about handling these things. But it would be good to maybe ask your mentor or your advisor for what do we do from here. So you have to remember sometimes it's just the luck of the draw with the reviewers that you're getting. It depends on their backgrounds and their expertise, whether they see potential value in your project. So the key thing is to take some of these comments on board, see how you can potentially improve your paper, and then think about where to submit it next. So it might be that there are particular journals that fit better within what you're trying to do. And if you're working in a multidisciplinary field such as what I do, this is not always as easy. Do you go for a general materials journal? Do you go one that is leaning more towards chemistry or more towards the physics side of things? So you might want to think about what audience would be interested in what you're trying to present and really tailor your paper towards that particular audience. So when you resubmit it, it might be that you want to emphasize certain aspects more if you submit it to a different journal. Getting your papers published can sometimes look like a bumpy road, and handling reviewers' comments is not an easy task. So as I said before, please don't take it personal, don't give up, and if you think this is a good piece of work, you will get it published somewhere. It's good to bear in mind some of the realistic timeframes, where it is, for instance, where your supervisors can help you with it, and bearing in mind that sometimes it might take a while, but it will be worth the effort when you finally see your name in print. So good luck with this, and if you want more advice on how to write your first research paper, please have a look at the suggested video.